What if I told you that this tiny little bottle, this Vicks or Noxzema bottle, actually produced this much sea glass?
So today's video on sea glass origins is going to talk about just how much sea glass one bottle produces. You know, sea glass is something that's becoming more scarce and harder to find. That is true, especially with the interest, how many people are out there doing it. There's these places, especially like where I live out here in Cape Breton, where through the natural erosion process, these bottles, new bottles that have been sitting in the shoreline for a century, sometimes more, sometimes less, they just get eroded away after like a big storm or just in the winter through the thaw. So, you know, it really got me wondering, you know, like just how much sea glass does one bottle make? The rule of thumb that I always talk about is like one bottle per person per year would have went into the ocean. So a town of mine, like this old mining town here, I'm going to do a little circle. You can kind of see houses in the background. Right now there's only about 5,000 people living here, but about 12,000 people lived here at the height of coal mining, according to census. So most of that stuff was just discarded out here in the shorelines. So one bottle per person per year gets thrown into the ocean. So a town of this, that's like 12,000 bottles a year. So if each bottle weighs, you know, about a pound or 3/4 of a pound, we're talking 10,000 pounds of glass a year goes into the ocean for just this one specific area. Now there's a few areas in this island, like Inverness was the old town dump, so there's amazing amounts of sea glass out there. Just some of the crazy stuff you can find. And places like Glace Bay and Sydney Mines in North Sydney are also really, really good spots for sea glass as well. And that's because there was a population of like 20,000 people that would live in that area, and they just discard it in there. Now, you know, this is just a rule of thumb that I go by, and the truth is, I mean, the number can be a lot higher or a lot lower. And it's like out here in my town, I definitely know a few spots where I've been digging bottles. I've probably dug about 1,200 bottles out of the ground in a few different areas. And sometimes I'm just walking and it just shows up. You know, it just shows up in the shoreline. Okay, now, so here I am, I'm inside the harbor. And, you know, I was talking about the natural erosion process. And we're just after a storm. Oh, look at this beautiful piece. You can see how well aged it is. Ounces, so we know that's definitely imperial. Before the metric conference about 50 years ago of standardization. But anyhow, so yeah, a lot of the glass out here, it's wild because I mean, one of the feed areas is right over here in the cove. So a spot there, my son and my children and I, we find some pretty neat stuff. A lot of that glass, you know, it just, it's in the shoreline, it's in the earth out here, and then it naturally feeds its way out. Once I put all of my bottles on a scale, and then I put the actual comparative sea glass. It took me a while actually to measure it out and to get the right pieces, like the right sizes. And it sounds even silly, but like even bottles that I know are thin, I try to use the thin pieces and the ones that produce thick sea glass, thick ones. And tiny for the cobalts, because I really don't have a lot of cobalt as a true sea glasser. So here I have the harbor, and a lot of the stuff, a lot of the glass and the bottles and the artifacts comes from this spot right behind me, right over here. Yeah, we call it the inlet, my children and I, and a lot of it just washes out, so I'll flip the video. Yeah, here we are at the inlet, and you can just see it's like, I'm not even at the ocean yet. And pieces of sea glass, they're just beautiful, rounded, frosty. But then I'll come across, I'll find something beautiful like this. Yeah, right there, you got that right, Piggy. That's my girl, Piggy. And it's just so sharp, and it's just wild, the little juxtaposition, putting these two pieces next to each other. Even like right here, this one's a great piece right here too. You can just see how frosted it is, and that it just suffered some sort of a stressful event. You know, it got shattered by one of these rocks over here. Well, here I am, I'm back at home now, back at the Sea Glass Grotto, and I've got a few fun examples here that I can't wait to share with everyone. What if I told you that this tiny little bottle, this Vicks or Noxzema bottle, actually produced this much sea glass? So here we have the scale set. A little piece just fell off. So we have 1.8 ounces, 51 grams. So now what we're gonna do is shuffle all that off, reset the scale, and then put this one right on here. And now you can see it's just a little bit more. But there you go. This much sea glass right over here is produced from such a small little vessel. Well, the reason why I used such a small bottle as an example
is because this is the most common blue that I excavate out in my area. You can see I've just got a few more recent ones. And sometimes I don't even have to really look for these. You can just see them because they're just so beautiful when they get washed out of the shoreline. I mean, these ones are still got some iron on them. They're pretty farm fresh. But then, you know, if you lived in an area where some of these bigger bottles, you know, the amount of blue you can find really goes up. I don't find more than probably a pound of blue in a year, but that's because, like I said, I only find bottles like this. It's very rare for me to come across these ones. But right away, like I said, this one here, 55 grams, 2 ounces, and then we put this little Brahma seltzer from the 1920s. It's up to 84, so it's actually up about 50%. And I love this one, made in Connecticut, but found out here. Milk of Magnesia. All over North America, you can find this bottle. 12.2, 3/4 of a pound, 347 grams. Such a beautiful little bottle. Nice little cornflower blue. Just put less cobalt oxide in the glass batch, and it gives you that lighter color. And I love this one as well, because this one here is a genuine Phillips, made in Canada. Not sure if I'm getting that right over there. And this one weighs a whopping 503 grams, over 1 pound, almost 2 ounces. Now, the examples I'm doing today, it's 100% value for the original bottles, but I definitely have to stipulate that there is a reduction loss in the ocean, you know, depending on the environment. It could be a huge loss of like 50 to 75%, or it could be a small loss of maybe 10 to 15%, I hypothesize. And that all really depends on the wave movement and action, and also how long the glass has been in the ocean for. Because I'd imagine with every passing wave, there's a small measurement of reduction that happens as it's getting tumbled in the rocks. But these are some pretty fun examples, so I'm going to just move on. I love this bottle right over here. It's my green Coca-Cola variation. You know, this bottle is a good example because there were so many pop and soda bottles that were used. So look at that, 233 grams, or just over half a pound on this one bottle over here. Now it's pretty amazing when I take this bag of sea glass that I already prepared, and I'm going to put it on the scale as carefully as I can while I hold the camera, and we're going to see what that weighs out to. Look at that, 8.1. And look how much sea glass this is right over here. It's just unreal. All of this right over here, and it just comes from this one bottle. So then when you think about, like, you know, 1 bottle per person, you take a busy beach, you know, a nice little party beach in the summer. Everybody's going in the 1940s through 1960s. People are bringing cases of Coca-Cola, and there's no proper disposal. There's no recycling set in place. So it would go to like a rubbish tip or a cove, and all of this stuff just becomes beautiful sea glass. Okay, let's move on here. I'm going to clear the scale and get my next examples ready. So the next bottle on the scale is going to be this antique milk bottle. You know, I wanted to use this one because it was a pretty common clear vessel, as early clear vessels go. Now right off the bat, on the inside over here, it's very distinguishable. It's called the cap seat closure. Now there would have been a paper disc that would have sat there. Originally it was actually a wooden disc, and one of the reasons I wanted to use it is because if you look right here, in one day on a specific beach, I found 11 pieces, maybe 12, that have this exact cap seat closure right over here. Now one thing I want to say, and another thing about these bottles, would be that the earlier ones typically were round, and then the later ones were square, and then they'd fit inside a slotted carrying case, like a 6-pack. So I know this one here is a little bit earlier. I love it. Weaver quality blue ribbon products. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn the scale on. 0. And we're going to put this one on. Let's take a look at that. 408, 14.4 ounces, so just under 1 pound. So now what we're going to do, I learned from doing the previous one that it's a little easier to handle. So I'm going to take that right there, and I'm going to dump this in. And look at how much glass is right there. 405, so it's a little bit under. And look at this. This is a pile of glass. This is what, 400 grams, nicely aged, and I tried to use some nice thinner walled pieces to kind of emulate what this would have made right over here. Well, another bottle that I seem to excavate a lot, and you know, a lot of people feel that brown is typical just beer bottles, but this is a Javex or a Purex bottle, an old bottle of bleach, and this is a really, really common 20th century, early to mid 20th century bottle that I find. You know, I have more of these in my collection that I know what to do with. And it's also a little bit of a lighter amber. It's a really, really nice color. So this would have been something that every single household would have had and would have been using a lot of. So if you lived in a maritime town, it's very common to find little letters. Like I have a lot of Vex and Jav on my table, 16 ounces. Let's put it on right over here. 339 grams, or just under 3/4 of a pound right here for this one right over there. I love it. Javex whitens. You can see it's still farm fresh, dirty. Like I said, I find so many of these bottles, I don't even know what to do with them. So the scale is level, and let's dump this bag in and see how much sea glass, 3/4 of a pound of Javex bottle. Right there, 342. You can just see beautiful sea glass, nicely well aged. You know, different shades of amber. These lighter ones right over here, you can more hypothesize would have come from one of these Javex bottles, and then maybe the darker ones would have come from a beer bottle, or even one of these bottles right over here. I love this one. It's a Sioux City cream soda. Love it. It's got a cowboy riding a horse. You know, one thing I can tell you about this bottle, it does have this, oh, it's made in Mexico, which is wild. It's got this anti-slip embossing right around the edges right over here, and you're not going to see that typically until around 1960 and later. And that's a good indicator for the bottom of a bottle.
You know, this question kind of falls under the science of sea glass. Behind me, there's that harbor, and a lot of the bottles that people would just take them right out here, and they would just dump them right in the ground. It's unbelievable, some of the things that just wash up. I can walk here 7 days a week, and I can always just see something new, even though this is like my backyard. I moved out here, I work out here, I live out here. My children and I, we play out here. We pick fruits and berries with my dogs right behind me. Yeah, there's one right there. There's one right there on the path. Yeah, it's just a great place to live, to raise my children where they're never ever gonna see an escalator, and there's no traffic lights for like 10 miles.